why fundraisers stay with their nonprofit organizations. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school, and I'm joined today by our colleague, Hava Goldberg. Hava is the Director of Corporate and Major Giving for Habitat for Humanity Canada, and she recently wrote an article for AFP describing not why fundraisers leave, but what organizations can do to encourage those fundraisers to stay. And Hava, thanks so much for being with us here on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you are a veteran fundraiser, a lot of fundraising expertise, a lot of success. Why is this topic important to you? What has brought this to your attention?
I started reflecting on this in January when I hit my 7-year anniversary at Habitat for Humanity Canada. And in hitting this anniversary, I got obviously a lot of kudos and congrats from colleagues, but a lot of shock and surprise as well from people who couldn't imagine staying at a charity for that long. So I started to really reflect on this and think about the reasons that I have felt motivated to stay at my organization and what might motivate others to do the same.
We want to talk about those organizational factors, but I just want to ask you, to the extent that you're willing to share from your own personal professional journey, what influences you to stay? Fundraising, we just need to call it out, is fulfilling work. It's also very challenging work. We're immersed in these challenging social and cultural situations that can enjoy improvement, but yet also seem intractable. What has allowed you to stay and persist throughout your fundraising career?
It's a number of things, really. I think for me at Habitat, I felt very committed to the cause before coming to work there as a professional fundraiser. It was a cause that I had volunteered for previously and gotten to know on an intimate local level. So when I was looking for a new role and I put together kind of a wish list of organizations that I thought I would feel very passionate about working at, Habitat was one of them. And it just so happened that a role came up and it was a great fit for me. But above and beyond the cause, which I think is, a really important one, particularly in Canada right now. This is one of our most pressing social issues. The passion for the cause is quite important to me, but it only takes you so far. I think it's also the organizational culture and the organization itself, the leadership that I've had a privilege of working with, my amazing colleagues, and the culture that we have built together there have absolutely been just as key as the cause itself in motivating me to stay.
Absolutely. A great point. Again, fundraising a challenge. We need to be fundraising for things we're passionate about. We need to be able to enjoy those successes. Those can help us at a personal level, carry us through those challenging times. But then, Hava, in the article, you mentioned some of these organizational factors, and you touched on them briefly there in your last response. I'd like to ask you to expand upon those. What are those organizational factors that can really encourage fundraisers not just to stay, but also to thrive and flourish in that nonprofit organization?
For sure. When I was writing the article, I was able to identify so many different aspects that I think really contribute to retention and motivation for employees, but I wanted to hone in on a few because part of what I wanted to do with this article is really motivate people to think about this in a different way, to not think about it as such a fait accompli that fundraisers don't stay, that there are recruiters out there that are looking to poach fundraisers. You hear about that a lot in the sector. It's not weird for someone to leave a job after 2 years, 18 months, whatever it may be. And I think that that's actually a very sad reality, but one that can change. And so I wanted to focus on what are these key kind of pillars that an organization can really think about in trying to motivate employee retention. So the ones that I decided to hone in on were, first off, values alignment. So even more than just feeling connected to the mission of the organization, which is something I talked about with Habitat, also feeling not only connected to the values, but part of shaping and building those values. So, giving the employees the opportunity to really discuss what the organization's values are, shape those values, select kind of those key words that we're always going to keep in mind, really make the employees feel invested in those values, and then revisiting them throughout the year, throughout the course of a campaign, throughout whatever your fundraising cycle might be, always going back to those values and making the employees feel very invested and engaged in them, so they really set a foundation for everything else that goes on within the organization. And really connected to that is building a positive culture. And that means a lot more than just having a social committee or having an EDI committee. That really means figuring out how to put those values into action and ensuring that at all levels of the organization, that it's not just the CEO using them as buzzwords, that at all levels of the organization, when we decide on those values, we also talk about how are we going to execute on these values, both for our donors and our stakeholders, but also for each other. So those are two of the biggest ones that I saw organizationally. And then I think thinking about fundraisers in particular, and how fundraisers are generally competitive, self-motivated people who really like to be allowed to run with things and go out and achieve their own success. So creating a trusting relationship with a supervisor and a team that allows for autonomy is, I think, a huge way that you can motivate fundraisers to stay. So often you hear people talking about having micromanaging bosses or a board that's giving them a lot more direction than they need in fundraising. Fundraisers need autonomy to be able to be trusted as subject matter experts that can go out and do their job. And not only that, who are also invested in with professional development opportunities and leadership opportunities if those are things that they want to have in order to move forward.
So, Hava, we talked about values, talked about culture, talked about helping fundraisers enjoy fulfillment in their own professional development and professional success. Sounds a little bit like the fundraisers work with the donor. What similarities are you seeing here between donor relations and fundraiser relations on behalf of the organization?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think they're very similar. And in the same way that I say in the article, we invest so much in donor relations and in donor retention particularly, but we don't invest in employee retention in the same way, when in reality, losing a fundraiser probably costs as much or more as losing a donor. We need to kind of think about retaining fundraisers in the same way we try and retain donors. It's relationship building. It's, creating these deep, thoughtful, strategic relationships with not just fundraisers, of course, but we're focusing on that today, but allowing the opportunity for much more than a transactional relationship, one where there's a lot of listening and learning and opportunity for both sides to feel like they're very aligned and it's a win-win for everyone.
Just as we endeavor for that transformational relationship with our donors, Hava is encouraging us to have a transformational relationship, of course, with all of our staff, including our fundraisers within the nonprofit organization. Hava, you've touched on several good points here, and I'm wondering if there's a way to summarize this. If you have a chance now to lead up to the CEOs and the board members. We hear about that often when we teach for the fundraising school. They say, my CEO doesn't understand my job. My board maybe has unrealistic expectations, or, both of those people groups have a lack of knowledge or expertise around fundraising. And that affects the dynamic of my relationship as a fundraiser as I try to lead up to the CEO and to the board. What advice do you have for CEOs and for board members to have this transformational relationship with, again, their entire team, but in this context, their fundraisers? So again, not just that the fundraiser stays, but thrives and flourishes within that nonprofit.
That's a great question. I think when I reflect on my fundraising career, I've worked with CEOs, both who had huge amounts of experience with fundraising and others who had very little. And I actually don't think that has really influenced the way that they treated and managed the fundraisers. What I actually think is more fundamental, and the best advice that I could give CEOs and boards, is to set these strong foundations of values and a positive culture, put all the right building blocks in place so that you know that you have fundraisers that you trust, that know the organization, that can convey the organization's values, and then let them do their jobs, let them have their autonomy. Where CEOs and boards often fall into pitfalls that really often push fundraisers out the door is when they micromanage, when they set the goals for the fundraisers, when they don't trust the fundraisers to know how to do their jobs, to be subject matter experts, and to provide the guidance as to what's realistic for the organization. So really, it seems very simple, but we see it time and time again in the sector. It's really about hiring people that you trust, giving them the right tools, being there to support them when they need the backing of the CEO or the board to go out and make those big asks or identify the right prospects, but to allow the fundraisers to really own the fundraising for the organization and set the course for it.
And Hava, I want to be clear with our audience. Nowhere does the article suggest that the organization should not have key performance indicators for the fundraiser. We think about, how big is your portfolio and the number of meetings and the number of asks and a financial goal for the year. And maybe a part of the portfolio is in stewardship in this particular season. You're not arguing against that. You're making this point that both can be true at the same time. This transformational relationship with the fundraiser based on the fundraiser's passion for the cause, the values of the organization expressed through an ongoing culture, allowing that fundraiser to experience professional development and professional fulfillment, while certainly being held accountable for success on behalf of the nonprofit. Both of those things can be true.
Absolutely. I think that we need both. KPIs are important. People as employees need a way of measuring their progress. Their managers need a way of showing the CEO and others within the organization where their department is at. But there definitely needs to be a balance between the qualitative and the quantitative skills needed for a fundraiser to be successful. So we need to be able to focus both on the number of meetings had and the number of dollars raised, but also what are the stories that the fundraiser is telling in those meetings? How are they engaging the donor in their values? And how do we set them up for success in being able to do those things? Those are things that are a lot harder to measure, but are key to a fundraiser's success. And I think fundraisers that feel very invested in their organizations, that are successful in their organizations, are the ones that work with their teams, work with their managers to find a balance between the two, and really be able to bring both those qualitative and quantitative skills together. Those are the best fundraisers. I think any fundraiser who's been in the sector for a long time has probably encountered people who are, salespeople to the core, who can go out there and raise millions of dollars and sell the cause, but maybe aren't creating those deeper long-term relationships. And so we really have to find ways to place value on both aspects.
At the Fundraising School, we teach that we should lead people and manage agreements, meaning, the fundraising plan, the budget, the operations plan, those are agreements. The job description, that's an agreement. But that's just for those accountability purposes, as we're talking about here. Leading people taps into what Hava Goldberg is teaching us here today. That's important in and of itself for the relationship with the employee, in this context, the fundraiser, but also then to encourage fundraiser retention and thriving and flourishing within our nonprofit organizations. Hava Goldberg is the Director of Corporate and Major Giving for Habitat for Humanity Canada. Hava, thanks so much for being with us on the Fundraising School's First Day podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
And content such as this falls into a category that we call professional stance of the fundraiser. And that is embedded within all 24 of our public courses that are taught in person and online that lead to 4 different certificates. Now, we also can take the courses in their entirety or pieces of different courses and knit them together just for you in our custom training, also in person. And of course, we also have our quarterly webinars and these weekly podcasts. All of our knowledge is gathered within our textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, now out in our 5th edition. This information on the Fundraising School is easily available online at go.fundraiser.ca. fundraisers.iu.edu/TFRS for the Fundraising School. Our podcast today has been produced by Mike Anthony and Jennifer Boffman. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.